All right, welcome back to the Ottawa studios of Inside My Canoe Head. I am your host, Dr. D. Today, Season 11 wrap. We're going to talk a bit about a hurricane that might happen to have punched upside the head the folks in southeastern United States of America. We're going to talk about conference and getting together and look ahead at what Season 12 has for us. So sit back, grab yourself your favorite beverage. Let's get at her. All right, thanks again for joining us here at Inside My Canoe Head. Thanks for your ongoing commentary. For all those of you dropping over to our website at www.insidemycanoehead.ca, there's a contact email down the bottom. It goes directly to me. Nobody else sees it. Nobody else touches it. We appreciate your on and off again commentary on our good, bad, or indifferent and what you feel about the episodes and what you would like to hear, because that's really important. I ramble on about what I think is important in the issue of preparedness, in the world of preparedness, and major global events that are happening around us. If there's something you want to hear, please drop us a line. We'll do our best to fit it into the season. We wrapped up Season 11. It is a wonderful opportunity to go on some pretty big ideas that are happening in the world, global conflict, the fact that there's a certain point where the government simply won't be able to pay the bills. And in American terms, for my U.S. listeners, who comprise about 32% of our total global audience, that you're likely to see in the future, my prediction is, unless something significant changes, and it's unlikely, that you will see disaster bankruptcies go the same way as medical bankruptcies have. That the idea that the government will simply come in and keep paying uninsured losses is likely not sustainable, considering where the U.S. economy is and where the global spending is going. And we're likely to see increased level of global conflict to some degree in a number of different locations around the world, number of different conflict bases. That's going to have an effect on how you do business and what you do for a living. Understanding that is grounded in a lot of the things we talk about here at Inside My Canoe Head. It's your exposure to and your dependency on this modern technologically enabled world that we love, right? Every day you get up out of bed in the morning assuming a whole myriad of systems, most of which none of us completely understand. You just make the assumption when you got up this morning that every one of them would work. And you don't consider what your world looks like when you temporarily no longer have access to one or more of these systems. And sometimes they do cascade down. It could be start with a powder outage, but that could take out your point of sale system. That could take out your grocery stores, right? Your grocery stores can't take cash because they don't know what items cost. Because when their electronic system is down, they have no idea what the prices are. Long day, years ago, decades ago, I used to work in a grocery store, and you used to put those little tags on the top of your can of tomatoes, and it would say 99 cents. The cashier would plug in 99 cents. You'd pay cash. Now, you show up with a can of tomatoes. Unless the scanner is working, the cashier has no idea what that can of tomatoes costs. So even if you had all the cash in the world, nobody could take your cash for the goods. This is the point we're talking about when you're building preparedness, when you're understanding preparedness, when you're understanding the extent to which you may be at risk. Really, the lens that we advocate for is looking at it through your dependency on and exposure to the 10 sectors of critical infrastructure. We got a bunch of episodes on that. We're not going to rehash it now, but it's really about, hey, this modern technologically enabled society is cool. I love it. It's awesome. Let's do more of this. This podcast is about what do we do when all that doesn't work the way it's supposed to, and how do I continue to chase my dreams, rock an incredible life? I don't want to be the one standing there spinning my head around, wondering what the hell is going on. I want to be the one executing a rock-solid strategy that I created. Welcome to Preparedness 101, and that's what we do. Nothing is more evident than what we've seen recently in Hurricane Helene has hit Appalachia in the United States, the southeast area of the United States of America, Florida Panhandle, or the Bend area as they refer to it. Catastrophic images. We've all seen them on TV and social media. There's no need to rehash how many bodies were found, how many bridges were washed away, how many homes are lost, how many people are missing. That data continually and regularly changes, and it will for some time. And at this point, when you see that kind of catastrophe, all you really can do is do what you can. What I can here, and thoughts and prayers are great, but what can you actually do? You can donate to legitimate causes. Now, I donate a regular monthly basis to the Red Cross. I believe in what they do. I've seen them on the ground. I've seen them internationally around the world doing work. And the parent company of this podcast, Preparedness Labs Incorporated, donates 10% of its profit annually to the Red Cross to give back to those helping people in the world of preparedness. But what you can do for the people you love and the people for whom you're responsible is use this as a learning event. As horrible as it is, look at the pictures. Just pause and think what your world would look like if you were in the middle of that. And are you ready to navigate that kind of catastrophic event? Are you and your family prepared? Do you have plans written, etc.? And you might ask yourself, well, where do I start? How do you get ready for losing everything? And we ground it in what we call your trifecta of preparedness plans, right? It's very, very difficult to say, I got a hurricane plan, I got a flood plan, I got an earthquake plan, I got this plan. I mean, before you know it, you have more plans, and that triggers two things. It triggers avoidance and apathy. We've seen the research. When you present people with preparedness as this massive, insurmountable amount of work that you have to do, people simply avoid it. Irrespective of where you are, station in life, socioeconomic, whatever your family is, however you set up this incredible thing you call life, the purpose of preparedness and the purpose of what we've defined here as a trifecta of preparedness plans is to set you up so that you can best navigate events, which, let's be clear, it's totally past your control. We talked about this earlier on this season, is we cannot prevent disasters. There's absolutely nothing anybody in Appalachia could have done to stop this from happening, right? There's no failure in government to put a bridge up. There's no failure to put a spillway in. This is just similar to the 1916 event that happened in Appalachia. This is just a horrible, horrible event that has caused an immense amount of pain and damage. What you can do is look at it through two different lenses. One of two things will always happen in every event, irrespective of how it's caused. You will shelter in place, which means you and your family, through whatever systems you set up, will recover back to your home. And in your home, you will stay until the situation normalizes. Right? That's called a shelter-in-place plan. It basically means you go through your animalistic requirements of food, water, shelter, health, safety, and security, and you build a plan to allow you and those for whom you're responsible to operate for a timeline upon which you choose. We recommend 14 days based upon evidence. You can do shorter or longer. It's completely up to you, but we recommend 14 days to support those people who will look to you in your home for that period of time. That's your shelter-in-place plan. Now, yes, it is a bit complicated in the beginning to think about all the possible things that you need to consider. Yes, and we've got a guidance of that in our book and in our Adopt a Prepared Life video course. But doing that, the only other thing that can happen is you're forced to evacuate, right? You're forced to leave your home, sometimes often on very short notice, knowing that it's potential that all of your possessions and your home will disappear from this world. Exactly what happened to far too many families in Appalachia. What do you intend to do then? What is your recovery plan? How do you intend to evacuate? Where are you going to go? What are you going to do when you do there, and what are you going to take with you? It's an evacuation plan that's not difficult to construct. If you don't want to pay for the book or the video course, that's perfectly fine. Search through our library. We've got almost 300 episodes of this podcast over the last 4 years with clear, detailed instructions on how to build a shelter-in-place plan and how to build an evacuation plan, because only one of those two things are going to happen, right? That's it. That's the totality of possibilities that will happen to you. You're either going to recover back at home, however that home is, high-rise apartment, farm, and everything in between, or you're going to evacuate to a predetermined location that you've chosen with a predetermined set of kit that you have to execute a predetermined set of activities that you've planned. Those are one of two things that are going to happen. The trifecta speaks to the one that I think is just as important, but is often not discussed in preparedness, and that's loss of income. All the people who successfully make it out of the disaster in Appalachia, let's be blunt here. So the people that survive, they more than likely have lost their source of income, right? So they're alive, and that's really, in the end, that's all that matters, right? But we do need income. We need money. We need resources, right? And the government is not going to be there to simply pay all your bills for an ever and ever amen until you get back up on your feet. The system won't work that way, and it can't work that way. There's never going to be that kind of money. So we call it what's your plan when you get fired. So everybody leaves the job they're in right now. You either die, you quit, you retire, or you're fired, right? You're going to leave the job you're in. So what do you plan to do when you lose? If you come into work tomorrow and get fired, or some event like the Hurricane Helene happens and you survive, even if your house made it through, but your place of work was washed away, what is your intent to do? This doesn't cost any money. This is just you sitting down and thinking through what you would do next to earn an income to support your family if your current income was taken away, was just removed from your life. You did nothing wrong. I mean, and I use the pandemic all the time as a great example, because really great, wonderful people doing good work for healthy companies were fired on the spot because of something completely and utterly beyond their control. I don't care whether you agree with it or not. This isn't a political or ideological discussion. That is what happened. So if you have those trifecta of preparedness plans set up, you have set your family up for success. And I don't like to use disaster capitalism, and obviously I don't advertise disaster tourism, but take the time to think this through. Look at those images and imagine if you were the one standing there soaking wet on the shoreline as your home and your possessions go floating down the river. I know it's hard to imagine, but that's what preparedness does. It talks about the unlikely but impactful things that could happen to you and how you intend to set you and your family up so that when it does happen to you, you are further ahead. You're executing a well-understood plan instead of running around staring at the sky trying to figure out why nothing is happening and you can't get a hold of anything. Recovery from the hurricane will take years, literally years. Some towns will take more than that, maybe up to a decade to rebuild. Because I don't know what the economic situation is in that area. But if something like that was to happen here, for example, there are no spare construction workers. Every single construction crew in this nation of Canada where I live is working full time on a project, right? They are flat out. There's no excess capacity. We are in a housing shortage. So if we have a major disaster that levels a neighborhood, it doesn't matter how much money you have. There isn't another free construction crew to come rebuild your house. Recovery takes years. If you can get an occupancy permit for your rebuild house within 2 years, then you are doing some rock star stuff. So when I'm talking about having a strategy, I'm talking about what are you and your family going to do for the next 2 years? Do you want to take the time and invest now to figure out what that world looks like? Or do you want to wait till you and 600 other families in your neighborhood are stuck in a Motel 6, running your credit card through the roof, eating takeout food, stuck in a one room with your family on shared Wi-Fi, and that's how you're going to start to rebuild your life? Don't set your family up for failure. Do it. It's free of charge. We've got all the information necessary on this podcast. Go to our website, preparednesslabs.ca. There's a bunch of free downloads there. There are some paid options, but set that aside. If you don't want to pay any money, perfectly fine. All the information you need is there. Take the time and invest in your family. That's what we learned from hurricanes. Those are events beyond our control. We could not have stopped the damage in the United States of America. But even if you lose everything but the shirts on your back, your job is gone. You are far ahead of the rest of the world and ready to go if you have this strategy ready, practiced, and understood by everybody involved. That is the benefit I don't like to say it, but that is the leverage you can use when there is calamity to other people, if you're not a member of that population, to use that as a frame of reference to just ask yourself over your favorite beverage, a cup of coffee, a cup of whatever you want, by the fire, and just figure out what would my world look like that, and have an honest conversation. Nobody cares. Nobody's paying any attention. This is just you and that incredible person in the mirror and the people that you love sitting down. Okay, let's think about this for a minute, folks. This happened to a group of people. What would we like to do as a family? What would we like to be able to do? Where did we want to go if we can't stay here? Those type of questions. Because it's not a conversation about that the government won't be there for you, right? This is not a slamming. Again, I do my best. Sometimes I slip, but I do my best on the podcast to stay out of the political and ideological frame. I just spent a week at a conference in Ottawa with 2,200 delegates from across this country of Canada talking about emergency preparedness and climate adaptation. I was on a panel. I gave a presentation about my own research, and I did a fireside chat with the head of the Calgary Emergency Management Agency. And I was on the governing body. So what we were trying to do is create a national conversation, right? We were trying to take a national conversation about how do we bring all parts of society together. Because we lack a culture of preparedness in Canada, and the United States is the same way. The panel that I was on, one of the guests was Brock Long, former director of FEMA, and he was there to say the same thing, that in the United States of America, there isn't a culture of preparedness. There isn't one here in Canada. I argue in some writings that I've done that it's actually a culture of dependency. I jokingly refer to it as we've all turned into a bunch of dependosauruses, which basically means that every time the least calamity up to a very significant calamity happens, the first thing people say is, where's the government? Where's the government? Why isn't the government here to rescue me? Why isn't the government here to do all these things for me? Those are things that our grandparents would never say, because the grandparents would just get on with it and get it done. But by doing so, they wouldn't try to be Herculean and do it all themselves. They had a very strong social net, a very strong network of community connections and relationships that assisted them, and they assisted others. So together, the community was able to navigate a significant event, help those people that were more impacted, and lift it up. And it wasn't the government by default. We have an exceptionally large outsized expectation as to what our government should be able to do versus what their actual capacity and capability limitations are. And that's not because they're bad. Many of my good friends are in emergency management, and they're absolutely brilliant and dedicated people. It's that they're in restraints, they're a limited amount of people, and they're residents of the community as well. Their families are likely affected by the same issue. So it's all about understanding that whole of society means you and your community, but it also means bringing the business community to the table. We have long had an ideological barrier in the field of emergency management against the use of the private sector in the field, because we're scared of price gouging, the profit motive, etc. And it's ridiculous, obviously. The private sector is just as much a resident of our city as we are. All of the employees that work at all of your local stores, they're your neighbors. Every single thing that the government uses to execute their role in emergency management was created and maintained by the private sector, right? But we really have to get everybody around the table. We have our not-for-profit sectors, and I did a piece in the Journal of Preparedness in Canada. The third issue that I published yesterday. It's available on our website, preparednesslabs.ca, free of charge. No email. Don't know you were there. Just a little discussion about the arts and entertainment world in the United States of America, and to some degree Canada, that has some pretty extensive networks of grants related to preparedness and disaster resiliency. Who would have thought that the arts community itself together generated a long-standing commitment to preparedness for individual studios and to help artists become resilient in the face of disaster? It's part of the arts community. So all of these communities are building these capabilities, but what we lack is that big conversation where everybody sits around the table. We don't need another governance board, right? We don't need another group of people who are going to make more rules on it. I mean, I'll leak out the little libertarian that I do have in me to say, I don't need more government rules. I need more people to talk to each other. I need everybody who could be affected by the next hurricane to sit around a table in the community where I live and talk about how we're going to deal with the next hurricane. That's preparedness. So now, whether you call it a community preparedness council or you come up with some other cool name, we need to be getting everybody that lives in the neighborhood that I live in, from the businesses to the government to the not-for-profit to my local community association. We need to get them around a table and start a conversation about how does our little community, however I define it, how do we think we're going to handle the next major event? And you've got lots of examples across the U.S. and around the world to use as a frame of reference for what it would look like. What if my community looks like Appalachia? What are we thinking about? What are we thinking about? How do we want to deal with that? Not just at the individual level, but at the community level. The conference in Canada here was the first major national level conversation. We have a lot of regional conferences. FEMA has a whole bunch of regional conferences as well around the United States of America. But what we lacked is that national conversation. So we had an opportunity to bring together thousands of really dedicated people. And I call them smart, not because they have a crap ton of post-nominals after the name and a bunch of degrees, but it's because they know stuff. And they're motivated to do stuff. And I would rather take 10 people that know a niche area and are motivated than 10 people with a sea of post-nominals and just assume they're the right people to have in the room. These are people who are motivated, enthusiastic, who believe, they look at what's facing humanity and see it as an opportunity to do some pretty incredible things and cooperate, bring all this together and have a national conversation on how does the nation see this? You know, how does the East Coast versus the West Coast versus the North? And it fosters those relationships we get together. When we bring human beings together, great things happen, right? We kill it by showing them a PowerPoint on emergency management. But when we grow it, when people get together and realize, you know what, hey, that neighbor I don't talk to very well down the street, they seem reasonably pleasant. We smile at each other when we're out walking the dog or whatever. By the way, that's an engineer. That's a building engineer who can help us to work on structural issues. We have a nurse, 2 nurses that live up the street. Fabulous. Maybe we can get one of them, if one of them's a first aid instructor, maybe we can get some first aid courses going. Like, all of these things are possible when you know who your neighbors are. And when you know a little bit about them. And the same thing for you. When you build a connection, because, and I heard this at the conference, something like 85% of people pulled out of the rubble of a disaster from an earthquake or damaged buildings are done so by untrained volunteers from the neighborhood. The people that just happen to be sitting around you regularly, your neighbors, your colleagues, etc., that's who's going to pull you out. Now, the urban search and rescue, the heavy and the light urban search and rescue, and the professionals, absolutely, they get people out. They get the far more difficult to dig out, the people way down in the burial, the people missing the first time around. But the odds are it's going to be your neighbor to pull out, to pull you out of the rubble. So I'd be pretty amped up to go over and meet my neighbor and at least, get to know them. Get to know who they are, what they like, what they dislike. Talk a bit about that last power outage. What did that look like for you? Start a conversation. Imagine how a community preparedness idea would look like when it was endorsed by all of the residents of the area, the businesses, the community groups, the government. Everybody thought this was a good idea. That's a level of buy-in that is very difficult to generate through a programmatic insertion of a set of rules, right? There's the libertarian, a friend of mine, that jokes all the time. When I deal with the government, I ask them 2 questions. What rules are you going to impose upon me? And how much of my hard-earned money are you going to take? Right? But what we're trying to say is all of us are in this disaster together. We all have a set of resources, and I don't mean financial. I mean a whole bunch of set of resources that we can share. We can use each other's different levels of capital. Our human capital, our education, our physical and built capital, the physical resources, and our social capital, that social network that holds everything together. That is what makes a difference in a disaster. All of the data that I've researched for the last 22 to 24 years in the field of preparedness speaks to just that. It is all about your networks and connections. That is the one variable that we can for certain say is positively correlated with better post-event outcomes. So summing all that up, I offer to you that if you do nothing else, that you should sit back, grab yourself a piece of paper. I like a whiteboard, Hilroy Scribbler, your notes app, a tablet, whatever, and sit down and ask yourself those questions. What would my world look like if I had to shelter in place in this house? Have a look around. What does that look like? We've got a guide for you free of charge. What does an evacuation look like? If I have to grab my family and a few items and I got to get out of Dodge on a very short period of time, where am I going? What do I intend to do when I get there? And how do I intend to recover if the highly unlikely but unfortunate event occurs that I lose my house and all of my possessions in it? What does my world look like, and how am I going to restart that? And the last one is losing your job. What happens when you lose it? Everybody does. What are you going to move on to next? How much savings do you need to cover that pivot plan and move your life forward? Take care of yourself, and that's all that matters. We're going to have, unfortunately, many more Hurricane Helens. We're going to have a number of events that cause significant damage to humans and the built environment around us over an extended period of time. That is beyond your control, right? You cannot control it. You can advocate for certain decisions that the government makes, but you don't have the final say. And I like to say that about a democracy that I live in here in Canada. It means I have a right to say, I have a right to a say. I have the right to vote, but I don't have the right to dictate the final say. That is a collective decision of all of us. So don't base your preparedness on a certain political party winning an election, because even if they do, they will eventually get their arses handed to them, as we say in the East Coast, and kicked out the door. We're in the middle of doing that in Canada. It doesn't matter what you think of our current prime minister here in this country. He's coming up on 10 years, and about 10 years is as long as we give people. So it doesn't matter what he would have done or what he would have been capable of doing. His time is up, and it's time for him to go and time to do something different. And the new person will come in, they'll take over, we'll have a bit of a sunshine, rah, rah, rah period. And then after about 10 years, maybe sooner, who knows, that person will be tired of, and it will be time for them to go. This is the cycle of Canadian politics and how it works. You can't control any of that, right? You're not in control of the outside world. What you are absolutely and unquestionably responsible for and in full control of is how you choose to deal with events that are beyond your control. We advocate in the world of preparedness that you take the time free of charge to plan ahead, so that when the event happens, you are executing a well-rehearsed plan, well-understood plan, not sitting around staring up at the sky wondering what's going on. I use that reference a lot, but we see them all the time. People pounding away. What's going on? What's this? Where's the government? Why isn't this happening? And then the quiet party in the back is just getting on with it and executing their plan, and their outcomes are statistically going to be better than yours. Is really what it boils down to. Not going to belabor the point anymore. Hopefully today's podcast is a bit of a fun recap on season 11 as we move forward to season 12. Talked a little bit about the hurricanes, and really it's an example of the impact of things that are beyond your control. What do you intend to do when and if this happens to you? And then the value of getting human beings together who are passionate and enthusiastic about a subject matter, right? We have great opportunities, skills, knowledge rested in everybody. It's not the winners don't have post-nominals. It's the people who are passionate and want better lives for the people around them. So take care. Stay safe. We'll see you in a week and a half. Enjoy October.